Hello, this is Jon Croft, and you're listening to Cultural Warfare with Jon Croft, Episode 5. Can culture be forced? So, we're going to be talking about something fairly basic here in this episode. It's a basic concept about culture, and some people believe that culture can be a clean slate forced to change mankind into its own image, into your own image. And in other words, they believe that mankind is a clean slate, that we carry with us no history to be to carry with us when we're children, that we can use culture as a evolutionary force to force man into certain behaviors. So this is a little bit political today, but because politics goes with government and government goes with force. So, can culture be forced is about the idea of government forcing culture or some institution forcing some culture onto you as a human being. So, that's what we're talking about. And a lot of this theory comes from, like I said, we're going to be talking about politics a little bit. But a lot of this theory comes from Marxism and the idea that Marxism wants to remake man as in its own image. And so what it seeks to do is get to your children young and eliminate the belief systems of their parents in children, and then basically groom them to become little warriors of their political system. So this is kind of how Marxism works. It works through academia and through the educational system. And it's a belief system that believes that culture is a slave of politics and culture is a slave of the government. So it uses culture as a tool to enslave mankind through the Communist Party. So that's just kind of how Marxism works, and so it prefers the tool of force, but being as how a culture that isn't Marxist in its thinking isn't going to be forced. No amount of force they can use, they're not strong enough to enslave you physically. So what they have to do in a culture or a society like that hasn't been indoctrinated, they have to indoctrinate you first. So they use the culture as a tool to indoctrinate you. So this just kind of goes into their belief system, and many people are seeing it more now as a religion, and I kind of have always agreed with this, that it's a religion. Being a religious person myself, I know how religion works. Being as my father was an anthropologist, I know that many ethnicities are run like a religion. In other words, you are basically, if you worship the state, you're basically worshiping a religion. You're worshiping a god, a false god. And that many people have been kind of fooled into believing that statism is kind of some pure religion, that it's not really a religion, so therefore it's more pure than if you're in a religion. It's just about power. And then they'll repudiate the power of religion, which is kind of self-contradicting. So if you're against the power of religion, then you're against the power of the state, because power plays out the same way. But looks like we have Rebecca here, which is great. And as soon as she wants to request to speak, I will say yes. But as it is, we are talking about force and how it relates to culture. and if the two are interchangeable. And so, yes. So, are you there, Rebecca?
I'm here.
Oh, lovely. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Thank you for coming so quick.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if
Yeah.
you'd be able to.
Yep. Yep.
Well, the kids have been good today, so.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. So are we talking about the kids? Yes.
sorry.
So they are in bed, most of them,
Good.
and that went
Mostly
that
good.
yeah, that went really well, and yep, the evening is mostly ours.
Good, good, good. Yeah, I was just talking about how people believe, and so this is a little bit a mildly political episode. But what we're talking about is how some people believe that culture can be forced on people, and that's how culture is used. And so it brings us back to our first episode in some ways, right? Because our first episode was talking about culture Kampf, and that's culture war. And so that term comes from Germany, and it comes from the period during, like, before World War One, when the Prussian Empire was forming power in the German nation. And so this was kind of like about um, national power versus religious power and the power of the people. And so these national the idea of creating national power around you know uh, culture, or using culture rather to create national power, was kind of a new idea in some ways. And so now we have what came from that is other uses of Marxism to um, basically control culture and use that to control the people. And
Yeah.
yeah, but my belief is that, like, I think a more story related and artistic related understanding of culture. So
Yeah.
coming at things as an artist, not just as a religious person, but as an artist, I come at culture from the idea of awe and beauty and inspiration. And so these things are what inspires me to believe in stories and the power of these stories and mythology and things like this. And I don't find any of those beautiful things in these other political movements that try to force people into a certain belief system.
Mm.
I just don't see anything beautiful there. In fact, it
Yeah.
almost feels like they are removing anything beautiful. Like, remember you were talking about brutalism before?
Yeah. Yeah. The architecture.
Yeah, that it made me think of that, where it's almost like I see that as like a non-culture,
Yeah.
or a removal of any embellishments, or it's like sans serif. Like it's like we're gonna remove any embellishments and beauty from this, to make it just very pragmatic and utilitarian. And we're going to make modern buildings that are all about just like the ease of use and the cheapness of the materials. We want it to kind of be, like, I mean, originally modernism wasn't about that, but it became popular because it became kind of this idea of removing your own cultural background. So when you came into the city, you were kind of like there as like a faceless, a being who's able to be forged and changed and morphed into whatever you want to be when you go to that city. So like you can kind of change from your past and become something new. And so there's like a facelessness to that.
Yeah.
So I always thought that was interesting. That as soon as we were getting like a more multicultural society, modernism was becoming very popular. And so that's kind of how I interpreted modernism. Is like multiculturalism is almost like an anti-culture. It's like you want to kind of get rid of your old culture, And I kind of look at it like you're a kid, you grew up in a family that has a culture, and then you go to college, right? And
Yeah.
that's the moment in which you decide, okay, I'm going to become my own person, and I'm going to like become autonomous. And this is also when these other faiths and these other political movements start to take root in your life. You become like you can vote. You become kind of a political voice, right? And so you can kind of like say things, but I think that's when you can kind of reform and reshape your opinions about the world. And therefore, what you're really doing is removing your past. You're removing your ethnicity. You're removing your culture. You're removing your religion, and you're saying, I'm just open to learning stuff. And then, of course, what happens is the primary voice in college is then what's going to convert you and change you into whatever you're going to become. That just makes sense, you know?
Mm.
I mean, if you're going to go to a Christian college, that's probably going to also influence you, right? So, if you go to a state college, well, the kind of more statist belief or the religion that college is supporting is going to then be what enters into you and changes you.
Mm. If you're open to it.
Yeah, so like this faceless modernist city that you go to from the country is like another representation of that. Like you come in from out of the country, you go to college into the city, and it's faceless, and you kind of like become like that faceless building, and then you change your shape after that.
Mm.
And
I
sadly,
like,
sadly, some
yeah,
of that becomes forced on you, I think.
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, no, it's okay. I liked what you were when we were talking about beauty and beauty kind of being removed, and that got me thinking about the importance of beauty and how it brings us higher, like it brings our minds to a higher place, and um, it puts hope in our heart when we see something that's beautiful, or um, when we engage with, beautiful music or art or nature. And it reminded me of a fairy tale that I was reading with Violet. Oops.
Yeah.
What I was reading last night, and it was really good. It was about basically this young man, his fiance is kidnapped by a witch,
Oh yeah.
in this castle where she's been turned into a bird, and the witch is so powerful. There's no way for him to overcome this witch because everybody turns to stone when they come near the castle. And he has a dream with, this special information is given to him in this dream that he's to look for a certain kind of flower.
Oh yeah.
And when he finds this flower, it becomes the weapon that defeats the witch. And as I'm reading it, I just had to laugh. It was just such a delightful idea
Mm.
that evil could be just defeated by this man. He's not even fighting her with a weapon or
Mm.
anything. He's literally just holding this flower, and it happened to be a flower that had like a drop of dew on it. So it
Wow.
wasn't just this particular flower or that particular flower has special powers or
Mm-hmm.
anything like that. It was literally just beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
It was just beauty that was defeating the witch, and she had no power over him as long as he was holding that flower. It
Yeah.
was such an interesting idea.
Sure is.
But beauty is really important in culture. Without it, we kind of give up on a lot of good ideas. We give up on ourselves and on other people, um,
Yeah.
and we go looking for something that's a little more cold and structured, and we let go of this idea that people are to be treasured, and instead we think of them as masses. And
Mm.
um, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to agree. I think that there's kind of like, as you get more as people get more political, they become more like, I think, kind of callous to other people, and people become, as you say, like masses and bodies to be controlled and moved around and shuffled around. So instead of having compassion for people and their needs and their and what's really going on in their lives, we just kind of see them as kind of like eating bodies who are taking from the welfare state, and like they're just um, removing our substance, and we're having to provide all of these things for other people, but they're not appreciating it, and all these kind of tropes that come from this.
Yeah.
It's kind of sad that um, the very welfare state that so many people thought would be so compassionate actually turns people into a number, and turns people into just an eating body that's taking your substance. And so it's quite terrifying when you think of it that way, because human beings lose their humanity at that point. And so that very system that we thought could be so compassionate is actually the system that could harm so many people. Um, and I mean, this is why for a while I was a libertarian, and because I believed that the true problem with a lot of these things was the amount of power people had, and so because they had all this power, they could harm people with all this power.
Yeah.
And it's not incorrect, though. That's not an incorrect conclusion to come to. But I think how things kind of went down in the last few years, um, it actually turns out that I think conservatism was the more accurate position, because conservatism wasn't just about protecting us from an overreach of power. Conservatism was also about protecting us from cultural decay, and this kind of immorality that comes into society also leaches into government, and this causes us to then start harming people through government. So that's when you think about it, that's actually the source of government abuse, is not so much the amount of power, but it's the way you use these powers. And so if you use these powers in a corrupting, immoral way, obviously this is going to harm people. And so conservatism is just a slight change of interpretation to libertarianism. Um, but it's a difference that kind of makes all the difference when you've seen how our government has acted in the last 5 years or so. It makes all the difference, because you know culture has turned into an enormous force to lead us towards tyranny in the last few years, and culture has served that purpose, like of trying to convince people that um, of these political positions. And so sadly, Hollywood has been, the right hand man, like moving these things in a certain direction where people in Hollywood believe that their politics is unquestionable, and and this is just incredibly unnerving and disturbing, and kind of ridiculous, just to think that people would believe that, when just 10 years ago nobody would even think that that's possible. You know, and it's not that there's these changes in culture, and so it's like, well, they didn't believe that now, but they do. They didn't believe that then, but they do now, and so who cares? No, these things do matter, and there are real reasons behind this, behind why that's a ridiculous position to take in Hollywood. And so it just feels like people have lost their moorings in culture, through culture and with religion and through power in the government. And so they've gotten a little bit power hungry, power crazy, And so now we have, it looks like, a system in which you have people in government and people in Hollywood, and they're collaborating, working together to change people's minds, and get them to agree with them and believe the way they do. And if you don't do that, then they will kind of force you through cancel culture and other means to believe what they believe. And so I don't like, as I stated in the first episode, I think culture conf is a political term. It's not about culture, and it misunderstands how culture is actually created. And so I think in the last 100 years or so, we've even changed our definitions of culture, in that we believe culture can be forced upon people, kind of like a prison culture, or like a place where you have very few options, right? Um, and for example, this podcast, when I was looking for subjects to indicate what the podcast was about, there was nothing whatsoever about faith, and nothing about religion, and nothing about like our, more specifically, our particular movement. So, which is kind of a conservative Christian entertainment. Now, there is an entertainment, but these other things really don't really exist. And so it's kind of like you're being forced out of this, out of having the option to discuss these things, because there's no place for you. Like they don't give you a place, where you can hang out with these kinds of people. Um, so this is not really how culture is supposed to work. Culture is supposed to work with voluntary discussions about art, music, media, um, any kind of like cultural message, um, or social message, storytelling, etc. Like there, people should be able to have a voluntary discussion about these things, talk about if they like it, if they don't like it, what they like about it, what they don't like about it, what they agree with. And in having that discussion, then that's actually how culture is formed.
Yeah.
You know? So in many ways, like if you're in a prison and you have to form relationships in a prison, half of that prison culture is about escaping prison. Like, and how you're
Yeah.
going to survive despite the situation you're put in. And so that's kind of like the involuntary culture you're being placed in. It's like actually half of this culture is just about getting out of this forced culture,
Yeah.
out of this prison. And so and that's not, to me, that's just not really real culture, you know?
So it's a reaction.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a reaction to being forced into something. And if anything, that's much more cultural than the forced kind of like messaging and propaganda you get. It's much more of a real culture to react to that, because it's an honest reaction, right? It's a truthful, true faith statement.
Yeah.
Like one of protest. Like that's a true statement. But like you say, it is a reaction. Um, and so, if anything, that reaction comes from a true place of culture that says, "Listen, our culture says this. It doesn't say what you're saying. Our culture says this other thing." And
Yeah.
so we're making a statement about our culture and who we really are through this protest. And so protest comes from culture. It comes from an honestly held position. And so that's honestly often a beautiful thing, and some great art comes from protest. Um, but I think an even better place for culture to come from is just made from a place of peace and agreement and discussion and enriching of culture, like more
Yeah.
open discussion, you know.
Yeah.
And some of those things just come from conflict, normal conflict. Like a comedian, he he or she might have a funny thing that happens that day, and then something bad happens, and then it's kind of working against their day. Maybe they're late to work or something. And through that difficult time, they get to create a joke. And that joke talks about how difficult maybe it was for them to go to work or something. Like these little observations about life give us interesting, like statements and
Yeah.
interesting pieces of art and interesting perspectives about life. And but it's true that also great culture comes from suffering. You know, so I think that the reaction to suffering and pain and war and all these things is also a deep part of culture and what makes culture like relevant.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
so in that sense, someone forcing something on you can help you make good culture, but it comes from
Yeah.
a place of suffering. Like, I wish I wasn't in this position, you know? And so that can really affect society in a deep way,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. I would I would love to see culture come from enthusiasm. Enthusiasm in its foundation.
Yeah.
So, like, if you have, a founding document, or if you have a poem that, tells the story of your culture, or if you have, um, the Word of God, like, if you have something that that kind of defines your culture, defines who you are and what you believe, that something beautiful would emerge just from that excitement,
Mm-hmm.
from what that is. Like I'm really excited about Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no like reaction to something else. Like, what really bothers me is people who are not excited about Jesus.
Right.
I don't have any um, feelings like that. It's just this like I'm just very enthusiastic about who he is and what he did, and
Yeah.
it has it has little to do with anything else that's going on around me. It's just, and it's very, I can't really think of the word. I almost
Enriching.
say, yeah, yeah, I almost want to say empowering, but it's very,
Positive. It's a positive statement.
yeah, and it's not dependent on anything else.
Right.
It's just a place that I'm in. I'm in this fortress. The name of the Lord is a strong tower.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in this strong tower, and I'm just, there's poetry coming out of the tower. Like there's just beauty and poetry coming out of this excitement for what I
Mm-hmm.
believe. And I would love to see culture develop that way.
Yeah.
Develop as, just the excitement of what they believe. And I really don't follow this stuff quite as much as you do, but when I think of these um, trad trad Catholics, and
Mm-hmm. Sure.
and and when I think of I don't know, like cottage core, and I'm like, what a cool
Yeah.
concept of people just being like, um, hey, we're just going to be old fashioned,
Yeah.
and we're just going to embrace everything that's sort of stuffy and old fashioned, and
That's fun. Yeah.
and not be ashamed of it at all. And that, to me, that's really beautiful. That's coming from a place of enthusiasm for
Yep.
what they believe, enthusiasm in their culture and their belief and their structure. I think that's what I'm looking for. Their structure.
Yeah. 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 I have to agree. I mean, I think you know, just because you love something doesn't mean you have to hate something else. I mean,
Yeah.
but I think also we have to remember that our society is kind of really can't stand it when you don't like something. Like they want you to like everything. And if they have an idea, they want you to like their idea too. They don't want you to ever dislike some idea. Have you noticed that?
I think so. Yeah.
So like if you ever dislike something or somebody, then you're made to kind of feel bad for that. But the funny thing is though, in order to be an authentic, true individual, you have to honestly answer the question like, what do you like? Like, what's your favorite color? Like, get as basic as you want to get, right? You could be in kindergarten and they're like, what's your favorite color? And you have to pick some color now. Like, I don't know why you have to pick a color, but you do. So like, and then you start to have that thought about who you are as a person, right? You start to become aware of yourself and your likes and your dislikes, and that's just it, right? If you have a like, then that means you have a dislike, and you can't really prevent that.
Mm-hmm.
That's just how things work. If you like the number 4, you don't like the number 7 as much. You just like that's kind of an obvious statement. And so if you like green, you don't like blue as much, etc. And if you like Christianity, then that means you don't like these other religions as much. And
Mm-hmm.
that's just a fact of life. It's just very basic. It's basic math, right? So it's just kind of logical. It's a logical statement. And yet our society has so much trouble with this. They have so much trouble with the idea that you have preferences of one faith or one political position over another.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it's like opinions, like right, we've all got them, and we of course have a right to those opinions. And so these kind of like statements in the obverse to intolerance are kind of obvious statements. Obviously you're going to dislike things, and obviously you have a right to that opinion. So getting upset about these things is kind of, it doesn't make sense, really. Like getting upset about the fact you don't like green, the color green, does not make sense. And so likewise, getting upset because you're not a Democrat, or getting upset because you're not, and if you're not a Muslim, is likewise ridiculous. So this is just something that society hasn't come to terms yet.
Yeah.
We get very precious about certain beliefs, and
Yeah.
if you're a religious person, or if you're a political person, then you're going to have someone come at you with their intolerance, and yet they haven't thought about the fact that this is just a ridiculous thing to do. It's just ridiculous. It doesn't make sense. So
Yeah.
we just haven't. I don't know why we haven't gotten there yet. Like we've gotten to the place of understanding the importance of science and math and all these other logical propositions, but we can't then come to the proposition that people are have a right to their opinion about these things. So
Yeah.
it's kind of strange that we're at this place now.
Yeah. I mean, there's always people speaking out, um, and lashing out. Um, but most people who are religious are in their particular religion, and they've chosen to walk away from other religions and other beliefs so they could
Mm,
pursue one particular belief.
right.
So I mean, is the idea to just get rid of all religions? Because
Mm,
that is kind. I mean, I think that's still a pretty extreme idea.
of course.
Um, because anyone who's got any, religious beliefs is preferring their beliefs over another.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just, you can't just say one group does this all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know. People speak out, they speak loudly, they say kind of ridiculous things.
Sure. I mean, we're human, right? We say ridiculous things, you know? The least ridiculous thing we can say is that we're human and we say ridiculous things. It's patently obvious.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, this is just kind of like being an adult, you could say. And so
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is just that some of our belief systems or some of our educational institutions haven't kind of helped us to grow out of these kind of petulant, childlike tantrums we get when someone
Yeah.
doesn't agree with us, you know.
Yeah. There's always, we can always find an overlap with someone. I can always find something where we do agree, and it could be something just as small as ice cream is good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's always possible to find agreement with someone. And, if you refuse to, like, I don't know, if people are, like, refusing to, if people are just focused, hyper focused on one issue, then how does that, make them, in what way are they taking a high road
Mm.
um, above someone else who maybe they feel is doing the same thing?
Yeah.
Like, why would we fight fire with fire
Mm.
when we could fight fire with, beauty and unity and,
Yeah.
a special flower that has a drop of dew on it?
Or at least logic and compassion and kindness. Like one of the things
Yeah.
that I like about at least what our academia was supposed to be, which came from the academy and came from the old classical world, And at least one of the things I really liked about that old Greek world was the idea that debate and discussion was actually kind of like a friendly thing. And it wasn't meant to be kind of a source of contention between somebody. It was actually meant to be kind of like, if anything, your sparring partner in martial arts was a good friend to you, right? So that there was an understanding of that someone who actually was willing to talk with you, not just in agreement all the time, but sometimes playing devil's advocate and saying, yes, but what about this and what about that? That actually is supposed to come from a place of love
Yeah.
and a desire, a sincere desire to understand and almost to agree with them in some way. Like you almost want to agree with your friend.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're caught between logic and rationality and love for this other person. And so there's this tension between all those things. And I think a goodness can really come out of that. There's a beauty and a goodness that comes out of that, which is kind of like science, right? Like science in a way is something that came out of this understanding that in the classical world there were these three things, right? Which was beauty, goodness, and truth.
Mm.
And that if you're seeking all those things, then it's going to make your society great. And but I think that was coming from a microcosm of a relationship. And so like
Yeah.
that relationship, if you were seeking those things in that relationship, it was going to strengthen your relationship, strengthen your ties with family or friends, and you'll not only have a stronger relationship with them by debating with them in a kind way, right? But you also make each other richer, stronger, better. Your debating ability will increase, and it'll make your entire community and culture stronger as a result. So, this is kind of like living in nature, right? Like nature makes you better. If you don't learn the techniques of nature to survive, you're not going to survive, and your community and culture won't thrive. And so you kind of have to go through a little bit of hard times, and there's this seasonal uh, matter to that where things are difficult and then easier. And so it's like life, right? You're growing, and there's birth, and there's growth, and there's adolescence, and then you're becoming an adult where you take responsibility. And there's all these seasons in life you have to kind of go through. And all these things make you stronger. And so if you have someone there with you who's not giving you too much you can handle, they're not too intense, they're not coming from a place of hatred or intolerance, they're coming from an honest place of love. And yet they're also seeking truth as well. And they're seeking beauty to come out of the relationship, and they're seeking goodness to come out of the relationship.
Well, this is a real skill.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you need you need maturity on one side, and you need a person who's able to argue without making personal attacks.
Right, exactly.
And this is really something that, is learned and doesn't happen naturally, or, maybe later on in life it does. I don't know. But, not having any siblings myself, I don't have the skill or
I think you've developed it. You've developed
maybe,
it.
Yeah.
Like maybe I've helped you develop it, but because I had three brothers, and there was a lot of debate,
Yeah, it makes me think of this verse. I don't know if I'm quoting it correctly, but it's about how Moses brought the law, but Jesus came with mercy and truth. And I'm thinking about those words, mercy and truth, and why those words? Like, there's so many other words we could use to say what Jesus brought.
Yeah.
But the thing that's so powerful about those words is that the truth can be alarming sometimes.
Yeah.
And it can make us uncomfortable and can really throw us out of our, now I'm thinking of the law of Moses. So the truth can really throw us out of our culture quite dramatically in ways that we're uncomfortable with.
Yeah.
But then there's mercy as well. Like, he always has the mercy, the compassion. So I think that's part of debate. God says, come, let us reason together. And I think that's part of the debate, is let's engage the truth with mercy towards each other.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's I think an honesty to get to the truth, and also I think God is a personal God. There's the idea of love. Like he, a lot of people would balk at this if they're not a Christian. They don't necessarily believe that God is a loving God, but we know that He is, and we know that this is a primary part of why He made everything the way He did with the Gospels, and why Christ died for us. And so we know all of these answers, and we feel the intimacy of God when we pray to Him, when we praise Him, and because we know Him, right? Thank God. He's so good. But but it's kind of like a dating relationship, right? Like you're dating with somebody and you're getting to know them, and so you're having fun, You're telling jokes. You're talking about your past. You're opening up to this person, and you're starting to trust them in this way or in that way. And so part of this let us reason together is to also say, do you really trust me? Do you really love me? And that's what you're going through with dating, right? Like, do I really love this person? Like, I don't want to hear the word love in the first 5 dates. You know what I mean? Like, people have these rules, right? Because it's like, well, that just sounds insincere, like if you're going to say that. And so this person is kind of maybe a little too needy or whatever, but it's too early for me. And so, but but the reason people have these rules is because it's important to them that this is authentic. It's important to them that truth, right, is part of the relationship.
Right.
And beauty comes often from suffering. So beauty comes from difficulty and like waiting for a good relationship with someone. Before you're going to admit you love them, you're kind of waiting, and you have to kind of go through some difficult times with that person before you're willing to kind of say, you know what, like, I'd be willing to go through a lot of suffering for this person. This is how much I feel for them and care for them. And then you realize eventually that that's love. And so goodness comes out of that, right? Something good, which is something directly more from God, from a divine place. That's kind of what goodness, really the nature of goodness is it's something more than truth in a way, and it's something more than beauty. It's good. It has good intentions for that person. It wants good for that other person. Like, it has goodwill for others, and it wants good for others, and so it works towards that, and that's part of suffering, right? So as well, like beauty. But like, if we were all doing these things in our relationships, if we all came from that position when we turned on social media and we talked to somebody on the other side, the world would be a different place. And so what we're at right now is we're at the closing stages of our society where we've forgotten the beautiful things that, it's like a child grows and he looks out the window and he sees the beauty in the world, and it gives him or her hope. And so every day that they grow up, they're stretching and growing towards that beauty, towards that hope, that their life is going to have meaning and wonder, and they're going to have friends, they're going to tell jokes. And right now we're at this stage later in life where a lot of that has been forgotten. So a lot of that hope has been forgotten, and people have been through a lot of suffering, and they've forgotten the good, the true, the beautiful, and they're no longer looking out that window with hope. And so sadly, our parents, our institutions, our governments, our churches, so many people are not telling us and reminding us about the good, the true, and the beautiful things. And they're kind of letting us die without hope. And that's just very sad. It's a very sad realization to come to, that these institutions that have been part of, like, Western society and Western civilization, that have been like pillars, on this pantheon or whatever, this temple, these pillars are each one by one just starting to crumble, with people who no longer see that beautiful image outside their window in the morning. They no longer see the good, the beauty, and the true. And so science has fallen apart, like our religious institutions have fallen apart, and the beauty of marital bliss and familial kindness and all these things are all starting to crumble. And the reason is because we stopped preaching the good, the true, and the beautiful. We stopped talking about the truth of the gospel. We stopped talking about the goodness of our institutions, where we came from. Like capitalism was never supposed to be about money. Capitalism was supposed to be about a neighborhood of people who provided for each other. That's actually what capitalism was, is people who freely traded with each other with no force. They wanted to help each other. The dairy farmer helped the wheat farmer, and the tool maker helped them make the tools required to plow the fields, and all these people basically traded with each other freely, and that's a foundation to the free market. There was no like crazy capitalist conspiracy to harm people. Freedom is just freedom. So a free market is just people trying to help each other. This is just mutual love and affection for your neighbor. That's all it is. And so all these things were twisted out of proportion by political, movements. And, now you have all these people who are trying to control us. They're trying to tell us how to think. So all these institutions are being crumbled from the inside out, from this corruption where nobody really sincerely believes the truth of science, the goodness of the church, and the beauty of personal relationships where we faithfully love each other and give to each other. So it's very tragic, and I just feel like as an artist, empathy is the primary tool in storytelling and art building. Like empathy gives you, common understanding and compassion for your brother. And so, you can't really tell an honest story without having empathy for your characters. And you have a variety of characters. Many of them disagree with each other in your story. Many of them have different political and religious beliefs. Many of them are failures and are terrible sinners, and they do terrible things. And so as an artist, if you're a good artist, you inherently have less judgment for all these people. And so you come at it from a place of kindness for all these people. And I just think we need more of that. But also we need an understanding that, we can't forget conservative values, because conservative values bring us back to the understanding that there was something in the past that worked. And there's a reason that it worked.
Yeah.
And but it's not just about what works, right? It's about having a good society and having a good family and getting an education and a job and all the practical things that make a community work. A good church to go to or something, some community place to go to, right? And where you can love other people and help other people and contribute something to society. Yeah. And so all these things, these key institutions that are now falling apart, all of those things are upheld and supported actually by culture. Mm-hmm. Culture supports all those things in a common way where we can all kind of come together, no matter what religion you come from or political belief you come from or ethnicity. Culture is a way of coming together and talking with each other, no matter who you are. You can have an honest discussion with people, rationally discuss things, use your kindness, use your empathy, use your artistry, come up with a creative argument for something and kind of wow somebody with an idea. And then they can do the same thing back to you.
Yeah.
Or they can be convinced by you. It's okay to change your opinion. And we shouldn't feel ashamed of being wrong on social media or something.
Yeah, and of not having all the answers,
Right.
or of not being able to express how we feel.
Yep. And a lot of that's lost in social media because
Yeah.
how do you show somebody you don't know, what to say to that? Like you just don't comment. Like, but what is that? But it's so different in person. When you're in person with somebody and you're lost for words, that really says a lot when you're
Yeah.
face to face with somebody. But it's hard to do that online with somebody.
Oh, yeah. There's so much in the subtleties of body language that, we respond to in another person. And, yeah, that's totally lost in social media. That,
Mm-hmm.
it's like we're just using one of our senses.
Right.
When you're face to face with someone, you're using all of your senses to engage with them,
Yeah.
and probably even, more than the five senses that we've been taught that we have, probably just all kinds of sensing
Yeah.
happening.
There's
And
a
then
social context. There's like a context in your culture that you're developing.
so much context, and
Yeah.
then so much personal history, and then so much, so many things that we're reading in another person that we're probably not even aware of that we're reading in.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why when we do engage in conversations on social media, we've got to, like you were saying this just a minute ago, like we've really got to come from the perspective of love.
Yeah.
Love is patient, love is kind, it's not easily angered, it's not rude, it's not boastful. Like it's like that's a wonderful place to start. Just assume the best of the person on the other end.
Mm-hmm.
They're a person that God treasured enough to die for on the cross.
Yeah.
And any person you look at, no matter where they are in their life, is a person treasured by God that so much that He would die for them. Um,
Yep.
so coming at it from that perspective helps.
Yeah. It does. It does. Yeah. I mean, Jesus says that each one of us is worth more than the entire planet.
Mm,
Um, and a lot of people they don't. A lot of people don't know that or they forget it. Like how He cares for each one of us.
yeah.
Um, but like, so so there's a call to action that says we really need to love each other through culture and
Yeah.
remember why we're here. Like we're here to improve our communities by being good neighbors to each other, and so having
Yeah.
real discussions with each other.
Mm,
The way I wanted to end this discussion is today is getting a little more like inspiring people as it comes to what they can actually do in culture.
mm,
And so like I've been talking very theoretically, very academically, very kind of like conceptually about culture, culture war, etc. And but I think a lot of people they don't really get into that conceptual stuff. What they want to do is get into like the the bones, get into the meat of like how to actually make culture. And they want to know that you're real, like you have skin in the game, like you're actually working towards something instead of just a bunch of talky talk.
yeah.
Um, Now these talks do matter, and they do teach people that there's a reason we're doing this. It's not just because we want to have a podcast or whatever. Like that's
Yeah.
silly. Um, but before doing Media Moses and before doing this show, I was in film for about 15 years. Before that, I did some video with you and with some other people, Troy Bowman. And before that, I was in music and writing. And I'm still doing writing today. I'm just starting to get back into music, as you know.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
But, these are one of the reasons this was very difficult for me and why I haven't really made a lot of stuff that people know about right now is because of my experience in my career and in my experience with college. And college was an academic world to me that was abusive. It wasn't it wasn't like enriching and teaching me something. Like I actually learned very little in college. What I was learning was how to placate people who did disagreed with me. And that proved to be almost impossible. For someone like me, it was very difficult. Um, so I ended up failing college and not passing college because it was literally by writing classes. And the reason is because we had to write, we had to give our opinion, we had to give our beliefs. And so it was too difficult for me to just give my teacher what they wanted, which they wanted me to write about smut. I'll be honest. And I've told you this story.
Yeah.
But the teacher literally would come up in the class and give people an example of the kind of stuff he would want us to write about. And he literally brought someone up to the class and said, and read their story, and it was about a sexual encounter. And he said, "This is what I want to hear about. This is what I want you to write about." And so, like, no joke, it was kind of like, it was very offensive. Um, but his explanation for it was he felt it was passionate and about real life. That was his explanation. And so I could actually see a writer saying that, like, this is about real life. This is about real, you know, real living. Like that's what real living was to him. Like all your sexual exploits. And so, as a Christian, like that just is ridiculous to me. Like life is so much more than that. And especially if you're going to talk about the arts, like there's just so much more to say than pornography. Like that's, you know what I mean? Like pornography isn't even art. So, it didn't make any sense to me. So I literally would write stuff I normally would write to him. I didn't modify anything. And I ended up getting, he would give me just bad enough grades to fail me. Like it was like he was kind of like, he didn't want to come into conflict with me because maybe he felt like I would proselytize to him or something, and he didn't want that. So he didn't want to have a discussion with me, but he wanted to just give me enough to where I wasn't going to pass. Like he would give me D's and stuff. Sometimes a C, sometimes F's, you know. And then his explanation for why I was doing badly was that I wasn't giving him enough of myself. I wasn't, like all this kind of like touchy-feely stuff. Nothing to do with what good writing was about or anything grammatical or anything like that. Nothing like that was even on his lips. Like he didn't care. And so the college I went to, they just don't engage in academic forgiveness. So there was never at any point any idea that I could retake the class and solve that problem. So I kind of gave up after like 5 years or something of trying to work with this college, and it really like demoralized me in many ways. Because I'm not like, I've never been like just a go do a good honest day's work person. I've always been more of like an intellectual. So as a result, I always wanted to do more like academic stuff. And initially, as you know, I went to college for law, and I just was more interested in the arts and felt that I wouldn't enjoy a career in law. and it's just too much of a part of me to enjoy what I do. And so didn't pursue I pursued the very thing in college that I wasn't going to pass, which was, like the humanities and stuff. And apparently this is the very place where people like me are not wanted. So so yeah, I didn't do very well in college, even though I think if I was in the right field, I could have done just fine.
Yeah.
Um, and um, so I really think that the issue is people like me aren't appreciated in various places because I'm challenging people in their beliefs. And the thing is, even people that the difficult thing for me is that even like fellow Christians often aren't like interested in hearing what I have to say either because I'm an artist, and artists are often shunned in Christianity because the belief is that and I mean like Protestant Christianity, evangelical Christianity, um, the same Christianity that calls like the show The Chosen idolatry, like these kinds of Protestants who don't really understand this like culture and stuff. They believe that it's some kind of satanic worship or something to like make a film, and so many of those. And I don't mean that literally. Like, they would never say that, but when you think about it, that's literally what they're saying.
Yeah.
So the truth is that they haven't thought about it well enough, and that they come up with these really out there theories about why you shouldn't have images and things like this in the church. And it just the thing is, the thing that they can't admit to themselves is that they're really talking about a bad feeling that they get. So they're trying to describe it in terms of theological terms or something. And this is why they end up just making outrageous claims, because what they can't admit to themselves is that they just don't like the way like speaking in tongues sounds. So they're just going to call it demonic or something without really understanding the truth of these things. So
Yeah.
it makes them uncomfortable, and
Yeah.
they can't just say that because that doesn't sound very religious.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it's okay to feel uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I understand. Like, I grew up in a Pentecostal church, and I wasn't always comfortable with it. It was pretty weird sometimes.
Yeah.
And, but, the thing is, like, people are really trying to do their best. And I think if you give people the benefit of the doubt, people who are
Yeah.
honest people who are trying to do their best, it's going to make more sense to you. Like, all these things are going to make more sense to you.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I've spent a long time in the arts, and I've had very little support for it. And I don't, it's not, I'm not trying to blame other people, but it's kind of like I didn't know where to go, basically. I didn't find a support system to go to work in the arts.
Yeah.
And my ideas were always kind of keeping me from that, because there was always somebody who in the church who maybe tried to help or tried to point me in a direction, but then simultaneously showing me that they did not understand where I was coming from, and my ideas would not work in their world. Like, it wouldn't work. So
Yeah.
so yeah, these are very difficult relationships, and sadly, many of these people just resort to seeing you as a bad person instead of like trying to understand you. So, and that's a sad reality in the church. Sometimes, uh, so instead of that good Greek debate we were talking about before, instead of that, it was kind of like you know, it became not a very helpful relationship. So,
Yeah.
um, so yeah, as you know, I've lost lots of jobs. I've lost careers. Um, and so eventually I ended up in the arts where I couldn't be fired, working by myself quite often. Um, and so my ideas are too far out there for a lot of people, and they don't understand them, so I intimidate them quite often. And I come in with ideas that shake people up and challenge people in their thinking. And so that's something that a lot of people just don't like. Let's be real.
Yeah.
They killed Jesus for it. Okay.
Mm.
Uh, so they're not going to like me either, and that's just kind of that's what he says is going to happen to Christians, right? It's not just to
Yeah.
artists, but to real Christians. So I'm a little bit familiar with some of this, and but again, what I wanted to say was that there's hope,
Yeah.
and I believe many in the church are coming around to starting to listen to people like me. Many people are starting to come around to like be less judgmental about the arts and about cultural, culture creation,
Yeah.
and are starting to realize they need to either put money into it, or they need to put support into it, or they need to kind of like become part of a group of people who are trying to make culture happen. Um, and so I would ask you, if you're thinking about doing that, please do, because we need more people who really want to become part of making a difference right now. And it's kind of a battlefield right now. So we need people on the battlefield who can share a foxhole with you and will get your back, and protect you. And so the good artists out there are the people who have been not listened to for the last 30 years. They haven't been listened to, they haven't been protected or helped. And so if they found someone like you to help them, it would mean the world to them. Um, and they're trying to do stuff like make an album. They're trying to do stuff like write a book. They're trying to do stuff like make a film. Filmmaking costs millions of dollars. So if you can't like make your way through college because it costs a few hundred, it costs tens of thousands of dollars. How do you think a filmmaker feels? And that film is likely not going to make any money, right? So, and that's even worse. Like you get a degree in something and you spend $40,000, $60,000, but it's going to improve your income, you know, and it'll give you a living. But this is not necessarily true for filmmaking. So how are these people going to, with no support system, and they can't be in Hollywood because Hollywood is just full of a bunch of hedonism and leftism and stuff like this. And so do you want these people to go to Hollywood and become that? Like, no, you don't want that. So you really want to support these people and try to find little ways to support them. There are ways to support them. It doesn't have to cost $1 million to make a film. But what you need to do is find people who know how to cut these corners, who believe in making good quality product regardless of, like how Hollywood says, oh, it has to be done this way or that way. No, people who think outside the box, and are going to make a feature film for like $10,000, right? And so that takes a lot of study. Like you can do it, and I'm actually planning one right now. You can do it. Like a friend, Paul Rowland, who works for Breitbart, he made a film called Exemplar, a black and white film made with, I don't know, maybe 10,000. I don't remember the amount. I think it was even less than 10,000. And it's out right now on Tubi. You can watch it on Tubi. So these things are possible, and it could take a few years to make a film, but that's how film careers get started. And so if you find someone in your church or someone in your school or something, some kid who's coming up and they have good ideas, they have the willingness to learn all of these skills, they have a story or two that they want to make into film, just help them. Like, just give them some help. Even if it's just like helping them buy a camera or helping them get their computer set up with an editing suite or help them with something small like that. That makes a world of difference. If you provide their craft services for their film, like that's maybe $1,000 or $2,000, right? That's not a ton of money. It's a little bit of money, but that means a lot to a filmmaker. So like all those little things can really add up. And but what I would do is talk to them. Talk to them about their ideas. Talk to them about why they want to do this. Talk to them about every little thing, all the subtext of their stories. Talk to them about that. If they will talk to you about all that stuff, you know you've got something. If they're just going to blow past all that stuff, like, oh, it's not a big deal, that's not necessarily somebody you want to work with. You want to work with somebody who can talk in depth about all these things over dinner or something. You know, like, if you can do that, then, you know, help that relationship move along.
Yeah.
Team together with like 5 people who can help invest in this person's future. You know, each of you maybe give $500 or something. You know, like something like that makes a world of difference. And there are programs out right now, like one of them, for example, is Angel Studios. Angel Studios is making some of the best films right now that are faith-based films. And the way they start these films out is by doing torches. Torches is just another way of saying a proof of concept short movie. A proof of concept short movie is a movie that contains the tone, the essential part of the story, the main characters, the basic idea of the feature film that you want to make, but you're making it in a short movie that's a proof of concept. So that's what that is. And so if when you make a short movie, it's far cheaper than a feature film. You're talking a few $1,000s. And the reason you do that is because what you're doing is showing other people what you can do with your storytelling ability. And it's not just your ability to shoot a camera, it's not just your ability to direct an actor, all these things, or to write dialogue. It's what, like, your storytelling ability through film. And so that's what you can do with a proof of concept. And then that concept is supposed to say, support my making of this feature of the same story. And so it's basically showing someone that you can already make this feature. You know the tone, you know the directing, like you know how to direct these actors, you know how to, like, everything is worked into this like 5-minute, 10-minute proof of concept. And so this is evidence that this person can direct the feature. And the reason you want this evidence is because it could be $1 million or $2 million picture. Like someone is investing a bunch of money into this kid, so you want to make sure they know what they're doing. You don't just hire someone off the street to shoot a picture, you know. So it's called a torch because Angel Studios, in their own little kind of culture, they take the story of the Statue of Liberty, and the torch was the first part built of the Statue of Liberty in actual history. And the French artist who made the Statue of Liberty, started with the torch, and the torch was their proof of concept that they could build the Statue of Liberty. And they took the torch around and they raised money with that torch. It's basically crowdfunding. And so crowdfunding is getting a lot of small-time investors, to give like $100 each or something, instead of just a few investors who have a controlling stake of ownership, right? And then they can tell you how to make your film. You get many investors with small stake ownership. So that's just kind of how crowdfunding works. It's a good thing. It's kind of the future, I think. And so a filmmaker starting out can learn how to make short films for fairly cheap, end up making a great proof of concept, bringing that to Angel Studios, and that getting approved to be made into a feature. And so that's one way to start making films. And this kind of basic idea can be done in almost every art form, right? Big art forms, small ones, does not matter. Start small, make something. A lot of people with filmmaking, the problem is the script, usually. That's usually the issue. And so you need people who can do script analysis. They can give notes. But I think cut through a lot of that and make an adaptation of a classic work, because classic works already have great writing, right? So now it's about how well you adapt this work to the screen. So that's really your skill. It isn't creating some original concept or idea. It's how to adapt like a classic work like Pilgrim's Progress, which by the way has never been done that well, and it's very difficult. But it could be something like Paradise Lost. It could be Dante's Inferno. It could be Pilgrim's Progress. It could be Bible stories, of course. Many Bible stories have never been committed to film. We focus on the big ones, right? We focus on Christ, which, understandable. We focus on many others, Moses, etc. Great stories. But there's lots of other smaller characters in the Bible, never done. But there's a riskiness about doing the Bible. And the reason it's riskier than you might think, is because you'll get people calling your film a Second Commandment violation of some sort. In other words, there's a high standard to meet. The historical accuracy is kind of off the charts for many people, and almost nothing will satisfy them. So this is a risk you take, but I think you should be probably willing to take it if you're willing to do some Bible study and some study of history. It's a worthy endeavor. There's a lot of other great classic works. Look at public domain works. There's just a plethora of great works in the public domain. I mean, it's enormous, the amount of stuff. You just have to be willing to do the research. I believe it's before 1928 now. I think almost anything before 1928 is going to be public domain. You have to research each one if you really want to do it, but look it up. If you find an older work, like something like C.S. Lewis and Tolkien is not public domain yet. It's stuff that has been done. It's great stuff, of course. Like we want to do it. Like there's stuff I want to do from C.S. Lewis, but like it's not public domain. Um, but the great thing about public domain, obviously, is the fact that it's free for you to use. So you don't have to pay anyone for an option for a script. You don't have to pay anyone for the rights to adapt it into a script. You don't have to do any of that. But you are still going to have to adapt it, right? So that's some work you're going to have to do. Um, but the thing is, this work can be done. There are people who've been wanting to do this work for decades. And yes, I'm talking about myself as well as some other people I know. But um, the thing we're forgetting is that we've been making entertainment for two reasons lately. And those two reasons are for pure entertainment and for propaganda. And we've only been making stuff for those two reasons. And that's probably been true in the last 50 years. Um, and that's a big problem in our culture. You only get pure entertainment or you get propaganda. But you don't get something that's enlightening and beautifying and true and good. Right? So that's what we need. We need stuff that has embedded in it this beauty and truth and goodness. So
Yeah.
real values embedded in there have to be in there. In our mythology, it's there. And so that's the term that Lewis and Tolkien used was mythopoeia, which was intentionally created myth for the purpose of, just like any myth, to inculcate values. And so it's got the values of our society embedded in Lord of the Rings on purpose.
Yeah.
And so we need artists who have learned from that, who understand that, and who are willing to make more of that mythopoeia. So this is a genre that we need to make a real thing. And filmmakers, we need Christian filmmakers and conservative filmmakers. And I think the Daily Wire is doing this with Pendragon Cycle. I think that the Pendragon Cycle is an attempt to make mythopoeia. Um, and so I think Lawhead really appreciated Tolkien and Lewis, and that he knew that he was doing something more historical, but he knew also that he was doing something mythical, and on purpose. So I really think that Lawhead is in that group, and the Pendragon Cycle is another attempt to bring mythopoeia to the screen, and we just need more of this stuff. And we need people who are willing to talk about the meaning behind it. Not just to make it, but to also have discussions about these value systems so that we can kind of fight off this notion that our values don't matter and you know and they're just old hat stuff. Like no, they're really meaningful and powerful things in our society, in our culture, that give us meaning in life. So
Yeah.
artists need this kind of support. So let's do it. We're going to be doing more of this, and we just want to remind you that we are here working on it. Um, and projects are in the works right now. So thank you
Yeah.
for listening. I really appreciate you guys. And anything you wanted to add to that before we go?
Bring on the mythopoeia.
Mm.
Bring on the Miss Pia. I love it.
Thank you. Well, sorry you didn't have as much to say. I was kind of talking a lot this time.
That's okay.
I appreciate you.
That's okay.
Thank you. But thank you so much, everybody, for coming. Where can people find you, Rebecca?
You can find me at Rebecca Loves Jesus on Facebook and YouTube, and Jesus Loves Rebecca on Instagram. And you could find me on Twitter X at When We Love Jesus.
Yes. I'm, of
Where
course.
Where do people find you?
Thank you. I'm, of course, here on X, Cultural Warfare with Jon Croft, which is at Jon Edward Croft. I'm the head writer at MediaMoses.com. You can see my work there, and at The Media Moses here on X. And also I'm on Locals, culturalwarfare.locals.com. So yeah, so hopefully this is growing, and we're going to have more stuff to talk about and to make in the future. So love you guys, and stand up for the culture.
Yeah.
Thanks, honey. All right, we'll see you guys next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.